So this is my Pecha Kucha, and the name of my novel was Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuville. So the novel begins with this little girl, and she gets a bike for her birthday, and she goes on a ride, and she falls in this hole, and there's a giant hand, and it's in this tomb with all these carvings. So this little girl grows up, and she becomes a physicist, Dr. Rose Franklin, and she gets assigned the head of this project that has to do with this giant hand. So then the novel takes us to these two army pilots, and their helicopter goes down from this beam of light that's being emitted from a giant metal part that goes with this ham. And so Dr. Rose Franklin, she meets these two pilots and puts them on her team, and their name is Cara and Ryan. So we meet a new character named Mr. Nobody, and he's like the head of the whole project thing. So they all together form this team, and Dr. Franklin, she makes this powder that can detect the metal parts to this giant. And so her and Cara and Ryan, they go out trying to find these parts all over the US in different parts. And so then they end up in Arizona spreading the powder, and when these parts come up, they break the round. So one of the parts came up and destroyed a neighborhood, killing 8 people and this little girl. So now Mr. Nobody, he has to play PR and try and make a cover story for what's happened. And so now we see the team, and they've gotten some of these parts, different parts, and they've gotten the giant, and they figure out that there's a control room. And so Kara, she goes and tries on the helmet one day, and it does something to her, puts her in the hospital. But then she gets out, tries it back on, and the helmet works for her. But it doesn't work for her partner Ryan. So now they've got one of the helmets working, and they can kind of do little bits and things with the giant. But the second time that car put the helmet on, a hologram popped up, and it showed her like what the giant looked like. And the giant resembles a woman who has backwards legs. She has a sword and shield, but they can't get the weapons to work yet. However, Dr. Rose, she does figure out that okay, this is supposed to be a weapon, like, and she's kind of self-conflicted on, do I really want to do this? She does. So Cara and Ryan, they've been working together a few months piloting this robot, trying to get it to work, and they get closer and things get heated one night. But there's a new man, and he comes in, Vincent. He's a linguist trying to translate the panels, and the helmet works for him. So now Ryan gets booted, and Vincent's the new pilot, and Cara and Vincent get close together. Then one night, Cara and Vincent, they're leaving the compound, and out of nowhere, Ryan comes and crushes Vincent's legs into a wall. So now Vincent's legs are crushed, but Mr. Nobody gets him some new ones, some metal legs, and then these reverse like the giant. So a couple months go by while Vincent's in physical therapy, getting his legs to work. He is kind of like still trying to figure out what to do. But they get a new girl, a new doctor. Her name's Dr. Alyssa. She's a geneticist, and she's kind of stirring up trouble because she doesn't like Dr. Rose, and Cara doesn't like Dr. Alyssa. But then they get a notification from the military that they found the head to the giant, which could be the piece to put everything together. So they go, well, Kara goes with the military and in the submarine, and they go and they find the head. But there's a Russian submarine guarding it. So they shoot a missile at the head, and that head emits a giant light, and it like just vaporizes the Russian submarine. It's just gone. So now the Americans, they have the head to the giant, and they put it on the giant, and now Kara and Vincent are in the giant, and they see that it has a sword and a shield like a lightsaber, like it lights up, like they can really do some damage. But Vincent, he's kind of getting the giant to move a little bit, but his knees, they just go weak, and he falls on these two buttons, and it just emits this giant blast, like just a giant EMP, and it destroys the entire facility, including Dr. Rose. So now Dr. Rose is just vanished, the facility is gone, and now the world knows about this robot. So Mr. Nobody's like, okay, we're going to put the robot at the bottom of the ocean for a couple years so that these other countries won't get mad at the US. So he goes and he does that, and about a year later, he meets another man named Mr. Burns, and they have coffee at a coffee shop, and he's like, Mr. Burns is telling Mr. Nobody about this race of aliens who came and dropped these robots off, but then they decided to take them back, but left one named Themis. And Mr. Nobody's like, is this really a story or is this true? And Mr. Burns is like, I don't know. So then we see Mr. Nobody, and he goes back a year later. Well, not really. And he goes and he has this new facility, and he brings Kara and Ryan back and has Dr. Alyssa as the head of everything. But Dr. Alyssa, she's really defiant. So there's a little bit of commotion there. But they get in this new facility, start working together again. And Kara and Vincent, they start learning how to pilot together and get in unison. And they're now running laps around the building. And their relationship is it's a bit on the rocks after everything that's happened, but they're moving everything along. So now we see Kara and Mr. Nobody. They get a message that they're being deployed. So Kara and Vincent and Themis are now at the demilitarized zone in South Korea and North Korea, and well, they're there to help South Korea, but they're just a standoff against the North Korean soldiers. And so now we just see them kind of flexing their power a little bit. And then we see them come back to the facility. Nothing's happened now. But Dr. Alyssa, she's decided she wants to run some experiments on Kara and Vincent. And Kara's like, I'm not having that. But Alyssa's like, we're going to have it. And so now we see Kara and Alyssa kind of fighting. And Vince is like, okay, we got to get out of here because this can't happen. And so they try to escape and it doesn't work. And Mr. Nobody, he goes to Mr. Burns for help on what to do. And Mr. Burns tells him about how this alien race will come back if the humans don't use the giant right. They'll take it back or they'll destroy the humanity. And then Mr. Nobody's like, you're talking about them like they're family. And Mr. Burns is like, I'm just an old man telling stories. So remember the guy Ryan? Well, he got out of prison and he figures out what Dr. Alyssa is doing to Kara. And so him and Vincent team up and they go and they try and rescue Kara. And comes to find out, Ryan tells Mr. Nobody that Dr. Alyssa was taking the eggs from Kara and trying to use the sperm from Vincent to make babies. So now Kara's been rescued and Mr. Nobody, he's gotten back in control, and Kara and Vincent are okay. And then in the epilogue comes to find out Dr. Rose isn't dead. She's popped up 4 years later thinking she's 27, perfectly fine. And that's the end of the novel. So that's my Pecha Kucha. Thank you.